Hi, I'm Nigel from mayamada, here with another storytelling tip, this time from the 2015 Pixar animated comedy Inside Out. Episode 50's tip was about Inside Out's antagonist, or lack thereof, which got me thinking about antagonists in general and the role they can play in your story. In the comic story workshops that I deliver with young people, I often talk about the protagonist-antagonist relationship. This can be with students as young as 8 years old, but they're usually able to understand and pick up on the key aspect of the relationship in that the protagonist doesn't necessarily need to be good and the antagonist doesn't necessarily need to be bad. This actually came up on the podcast, how there doesn't seem to be a clear antagonist in this story, and whether Joy actually fills both roles of protagonist and antagonist. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, so let us know what you think in the comments. In general though, it's more about conflict, and any good story is a product of the conflict between the protagonist, their goal, and the forces of antagonism that is keeping them from achieving that goal. And we often think of the antagonist as a specific individual in the story who has declared some kind of war on the protagonist. But this isn't the case for Inside Out, and it doesn't need to be the case for your story. Here are some options when it comes to dealing with the role of the antagonist in your story. Number 1. The out-and-out villain. This is what we tend to think of as the classic antagonist. The character that is all bad and fits within that traditional good versus evil narrative structure. Although this series had much better villains in its 3-season run, Fire Lord Ozai in Avatar: The Last Airbender is a good example of the classic bad for bad's sake all-out antagonist. Now the danger of this kind of villain is that it can lead your story to become very simple and not as engaging as it could be. Luckily for Avatar, there were other villains that brought more depth to the role of antagonist in each season while Aang was making his journey towards his destined showdown with Ozai. Number 2. The non-villain villain. This is one of my favourite approaches to the antagonist character, as it gives you scope to create depth in your villain and a story that leads you to think about the issues surrounding your central conflict. In these kind of stories, your villain will likely see themselves as the hero of their own journey, at least in their minds if nowhere else. These are characters who aren't necessarily out and out bad, but are in conflict with the protagonist in some way. You may even find yourself agreeing with this type of villain's ideals, if not their methods. Marvel's Black Panther gives us an excellent example of a villain who isn't necessarily the bad guy. In fact, you might even take his side.
I found my daddy with panther claws in his chest. You ain't the son of a king, you are a son of a murderer.
Killmonger isn't just in opposition with T'Challa, they actually want the same thing. It's just that Killmonger has a very different approach that goes to extremes our protagonist won't go to. Number 3. An inanimate force. This can come in the form of an organization or some kind of system as a whole, preventing your protagonist from achieving their goal. These types of forces of antagonism are usually a good way to make some kind of commentary on the organization or system that you're representing. And we see examples of this, like the Capitol in the Hunger Games or IOI in Ready Player One. The inanimate antagonist can also be the environment, and The Revenant is an excellent, if hard to watch, example of this. And number 4, the protagonists themselves. Sometimes the best source of conflict is already within us. And we see a version of this during Inside Out, with Joy's relentless need to reject sadness and solve every problem with happiness causing so many of her own problems. This is a super relatable approach, by the way, because we can all be our own worst enemy at times. And if you don't think so about yourself, I'm sure you've at least thought it about someone else. And that's your tip for Story X Story episode number 50. Let us know what you think in the comments or join our Discord and chat with us there. Don't forget to listen and subscribe to the podcast where you can hear the full audio of our deep dive into Inside Out with our guest Rena McKeith, art director at Trees Please Games. You can also subscribe to us here on YouTube for more storytelling tips and other videos from the mayamada universe, and we'll see you next time. Hi there, I'm Nigel from mayamada. Thanks for watching our video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos we have on the channel. You can also listen to and subscribe to the Story X Story podcast at mayamada.com/storyxstory. We'll see you soon.